You're listening to the 6-Year Stint NBA podcast, and I'm your host, as usual, Sean Temesi. Today I have guest Serigne back on the show. Welcome back, Serigne.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Clippers, currently one of the best teams in the NBA, having a franchise record start to the season, basically running on all cylinders, coming out of the gate, and taking advantage of kind of a Western Conference that seems a little bit weaker than what we're used to. And now it seems like this team is kind of kicking it into another gear, as the pressure is really on this season for them to make it out of the first round and even the second round of the playoffs. And so far, we've seen a lot of impressive things, and we've seen some consistency. We've seen a lot of health on this team. No one really seems to have been injured, and that's been a problem every single season. Their coaching seems to be at an all-time high, and really this team, after running back the clock over and over again with same core, probably as close to each other and in unison as they'll ever be, and coming off a very brutal loss to the Warriors last night. We're going to talk about sort of what they've done this season and what kind of trends we see. And then we're going to start talking about what this team needs to do come playoff time and what kind of moves they're going to have to make this season, if any, to get themselves into a position to make a deep run into the playoffs. So, Serigne, what are some things, if you don't mind me asking, that you think really have stood out to you in this good start to the season by the Clippers?
Well, obviously, the Clippers, really good team. They've sort of had bad luck over the past few years. I was watching one of Mike Krzimba's videos, and he was talking about how the Clippers were one of the sort of unluckiest teams. Like, they've had a lot of bad things happen to them. Like how last year they lost. They got who was it? Chris Paul and Blake Griffin got injured, and it just seems like every year there has to be something that sort of doesn't go their way, which sort of ends up ruining their season. I feel like right now they sort of have everything they really need to make a good push to sort of be a championship contender. I mean, they were the number one team in the West for a while. Really, maybe if they could sort of, I think right now their starting small forward is Luke Mbamute.
Right.
I guess he's been doing pretty well according to Doc Rivers defensively. I know he really likes him, but I was thinking maybe he gets maybe try to push for a trade, try to make a trade close to the trade deadline, maybe for a guy like Rudy Gay, or maybe if they could even pull it off Melo. But because so they can sort of have, I guess they have Redick who can space the floor. Both of those players are really pretty good shooters. Rudy Gay has had a sort of pretty good start to the season, and so is Melo. He's had a pretty good start also. So I think maybe they should sort of find not really a star, but maybe another just decent starter that can sort of come out and just help with the spacing, because they really they have, I guess you could say they have good spacing with Redick, but they
Right.
with like the way that the NBA has been going, having another shooter on your team really doesn't hurt. So.
Right, and it does feel like, I mean, this team is currently top 5 in offensive rating and defensive rating, so not much to complain about there. Both ends of the floor are being attended to, but it does feel like this team has been more focused on defense than offense compared to previous seasons, just due to the fact that I think over the course of his career, J.J. Redick has become a better and better defender with age, which isn't too common to see. Chris Paul's a tremendous, probably the best point guard defender in the league. And then DeAndre Jordan and Luke Mbamute are both standout players on the defensive end. So it really feels like that's sort of making sense now. And with Mbamute being put into the starting lineup and consistently every single game this season has started, they really seem to be playing great defense. And the idea of bringing in a guy like a Rudy Gay might be charming at first, or maybe even a Melo. Obviously, that would be a
Yeah.
whole different ball game. But
Oh, definitely.
I feel like I'm not sure if that's really the best alternative right now, because I mean, we've seen in the past the Clippers really every other year trying to bring in that wing player that can really make a difference, whether it's Paul Pierce, who's obviously at this point just too old,
Yeah.
Lance Stevenson, who just couldn't mesh, Allen Anderson, who hasn't really played much yet this season. We'll have to see how that works. And then Bob
Wes
Ute,
Johnson.
who's okay. And yeah, Wes Johnson, who I think
Yeah.
just is kind of an overrated player at this point.
Really.
And probably, yeah,
Wasn't he like
I'm
the second?
not a
Yeah.
huge fan. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. He was. Wasn't he like the second pick of his draft? I think
Fourth
2000.
overall in 2010.
Yeah, fourth. Yeah, that's crazy. He's drafted that high, but he hasn't really been.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's been on a handful of teams since in like 6 years for sure.
Yeah.
Pretty big bust there. But yeah, like I was saying, I mean, and then Jeff Green a few years ago. I mean, that's a player that a lot of people compare to Rudy Gay.
That's right. I forgot they had Jeff Green.
Yeah, right. So and then Jared Dudley, Matt Barnes. It's just so many players over
Yeah.
this little era that they've been trying to get to really fit in at the three there, and it's just not worked out. It almost
Do you
feels like
think?
a guy like Aminu, who they drafted in 2010 and ended up letting go, who's now a great player on the Blazers. I feel like almost he would probably be the best fit, is a guy who can still play D like Mbabute, but still can hit the three. So that's going to be a challenge. They definitely aren't going to be a finished product until they figure that out, and I don't know if they ever will.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was gonna ask, do you ever think maybe they could go do sort of what the Suns that what the tactic they use? Because I know they have Rivers, who I guess have been has been playing really good off the bench. Do you think they could ever go with that, like the sort of three guards in the starting lineup thing that like what Phoenix did a few years ago with Isaiah, Dragic, and Eric Bledsoe?
Well, that's an interesting idea. It's just that I feel two out of the three best players on this team aren't in the backcourt. So Blake and DeAndre are still there. I mean, if those two players are still there long term, then I don't really think that they can focus too much on the backcourt without alienating those players. But if one of those players were traded, that would certainly be possible. I'm not so confident with Austin Rivers being a crucial player on my team. I like him kind of coming off the bench, if that. But that opens up an interesting discussion. A lot of people now considering Blake Griffin to be someone on the trading block. I think Chris Paul has been rumored as well, but I feel that he's too old at this point in his career to really be traded in that sense. Maybe I could see something in the offseason where he would sign somewhere else, but him being traded at this point in his career after already being traded from New Orleans to LA, I just don't really feel like that would be realistic. So I feel like it's either DeAndre or Blake. And I mean, DeAndre has already signed 2 offers in the past with the Warriors and then the Mavericks more recently. So it feels like he's got one foot out the door. But Blake seems to be more involved in the trade rumors, probably because he's the highest valued asset. What do you think of the big three being broken up? Do you think that that's a possibility, and what would entail that?
Well, I don't know. I feel like on one hand they could, if they traded Jordan away, they could probably get some really player like they could probably fix their situation at the wing. And I guess I don't know with the way the direction that the NBA has been going in, it kind of seems like a lot of like I guess the teams that have been winning a lot, they've sort of not really needed a center that is sort of like a center like DeAndre Jordan. Like if you look at the Cavs, they have Tristan Thompson, I guess, but if you also look at the Warriors, like they have they have Curry, they have Thompson, they have Draymond, and they have Durant, and then Zaza is just like he's just there to sort of just be there. To be honest, like so I don't know. I guess maybe you can sort of just try to do what the Warriors are doing. Maybe since it's been I guess working for them, you trade towards Jordan, try to get a good wing that can shoot. I feel like that's sort of that might be because I don't think they should really trade away Blake Griffin because like you've seen him develop like ever since he was a rookie in the league. Like he started off just being sort of like a flashy player that was known for doing dunks, and now he's become a better passer. He can, I guess he has a really good mid range now. You've been seeing him pulling up a little bit farther deep and like I guess you can say he stretches the floor a little more, not really shooting threes, but it just opens up the inside for DeAndre Jordan to do more of what he does. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I guess right now DeAndre Jordan, you can like he really is like a lot of the stuff that he's doing like is mostly like I don't really think it takes I guess like skill. I mean he is an NBA player like he's very skilled like but I guess what I'm trying to say is that you probably could find another center that
Right.
can do exactly what he's doing. So I feel like he's the most expendable one out of the big three. So
Yeah, he certainly does seem to be the most expendable, and that's
yeah,
because I mean, we're in an age where I mean it seems that every team is just trying to get rid of their centers
yeah,
or just is putting otherwise starting caliber centers on the bench like Jahlil Okafor and Al Jefferson and whatnot. So in an age like that, it certainly doesn't feel like DeAndre needs to be kept around for too long here.
yeah,
And one thing you pointed out was the stretching of the floor that Blake's been able to do, and the fact that DeAndre's been in Los Angeles longer and hasn't been able to do any of that at all,
yeah,
much less even make a free throw, which, by the way, he's shooting uh, just under 51% for the season so far, which is it's an improvement, but certainly not good. I feel like you said, the floor isn't being stretched enough, and
mhm,
you can really see if you watch Clippers games. I mean, sometimes it just becomes too much because they do so much complaining, and a lot of it is Blake Griffin. And I think a lot of him as a player is just you see the way that he was when he entered the league, dunking on people, kind of being a household name, and everyone's like, favorite. And there was really nothing negative you could say about Blake. And I think a lot of people got sick of getting dunked on, so people guard him a little bit harder than they would every other night.
yeah,
And two, because of his team, he hasn't been really treated like a superstar. And I mean, obviously he gets touches, he gets all the minutes, he gets all the praise. But when you look at their offense, there's no room for him to operate, and he has expanded his range, but I almost feel like that's only because he can't get into the lane, and he's not going to be able to dunk over everybody. Sometimes he's just going to have to need more room in the paint to do spin moves and actually have a post game, and which I think he can develop. I mean, now that he's 27 years old, he's probably going to start losing his step now. It would be good for him to improve in that kind of aspect. And I don't think he's able to because DeAndre Jordan is just clogging the paint. And even Chris Paul, I mean, he's a very reliable shooter
mhm,
sometimes at points, but he doesn't really space the floor either for a point guard as much as
yeah,
you'd like. And so that kind of creates a lot of frustration, I feel, for Blake Griffin, who a lot of the times just the game is made harder for him because his team isn't more built around him. It almost feels like this team is built so much around Chris Paul, and people sort of forgot that Blake Griffin is the leading scorer. Blake Griffin is the future, and having a guy like DeAndre, I mean, it's great to have Blake have a little bit of a break on defense because he's got his buddy there, but on the offensive end, I don't think that Blake's very happy, and I think he's obviously not going to say that because I'm sure they get along otherwise. But that's been a huge, huge problem. And I feel DeAndre being moved would be almost beneficial, even if they didn't really get much back, because it would just make Blake Griffin that much better.
yeah. And if anything, I could also say that DeAndre Jordan has like has like benefited from the fact that Blake has been able to spread the floor because now like he's the only one in the lane. He can sort of grab all the rebounds, get all the putback dunks, catch all the
Right.
oops. So if anything, he's anything but benefited from the fact that Blake has been able to spread the floor more. So that's helped them to sort of, I guess, stuff his stats more so that he looks like he's been putting in that they are just
Right.
sort of handing him. Yeah,
I mean, when's the last time you saw Blake Griffin and Chris Paul run a pick and roll? It's
yeah,
always, I mean, if they do,
yeah.
it's a pick and pop because Blake doesn't want to go into the lane with 6 people in there waiting for him. And
Mhm.
and that's why DeAndre is the only one that's really getting these, basic pick and rolls and an alley oop every time. I don't
Mhm.
really see Blake doing that, which he should totally be doing because he's a high flyer. He's a bulky guy. He can probably set really good picks and he's athletic. So just doesn't make any sense. He's got
Yeah,
tremendous court vision for a big man too, so he can easily kick out to the wings in a pick and roll situation. So it's confusing.
yeah. His passing is really good. I've been seeing some Ben Simmons type passing out of him, and
Yeah,
it's like wow, like that's it's just so it's always amazing when you see a big dudes that can pass like Marcus All and like Miles Plumlee and all them. It's just
it's interesting that you make a comparison to a guy who hasn't even played in the league yet officially. But
yeah, I
I
don't know,
like that.
just
No, Blake. I mean,
yeah.
Ben Simmons certainly
Uh-huh.
is an interesting player. I like his passing game too.
Definitely, yeah.
You bring up Mason Plumlee though.
Miles
I I,
Plumlee.
f- I feel like he's so much on the Blazers. He's so much.
Oh yeah, that's Mason. Yeah, my bad. That's
He's
Mason.
so similar to Blake in certain ways. Obviously, Blake being like a rich man's version of Plumlee, I would say. But like they both have a really good passing game. They're both pretty athletic.
Yeah.
They're both not bad shooters. Blake being a better one, but Plumlee is just such a smart player, and I love that he gets the opportunity to start. And I think Blake could be a lot like that in a much more effective way and more of a star caliber way.
How would you
If he
feel if the Clippers sort of made a trade, let's say DeAndre Jordan for Mason Plumlee and I guess maybe a draft pick or something or a role player? Do you think that would benefit the Clippers or
Maybe, but I mean, like I said, I would compare Blake to Mason Plumlee, so having both on the same team would be interesting. And I don't really think that the Blazers and the Clippers are going to make too many big trades, seeing that they're pretty big rivals.
yeah, definitely, yeah. I just thought that sounded interesting.
Yeah. So what realistically, I mean, we can obviously talk for days about what we'd like to see,
Mhm.
but or what we would do, but if you were to realistically imagine what the Clippers could do, what's within their reach, what
Mhm.
kind of a move could they make before February to make sure that this team is a little bit more ready for the playoffs? I personally just quickly would say they definitely need to focus on adding a little bit more scoring because, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you can just throw Jamal Crawford into a game all you want. But really, there's not a lot of players on this bench that really can score the ball too well. There's a couple heat check players, but not a lot of guys that can kind of come in and score. And I don't really like Austin Rivers being given the green light too much. So that's just my take. Well, what do you think? What kind of player would they be able to get?
Well, honestly, at this point, since I guess you can say their success rate with what they've been working with has been, I guess you can say acceptable. Seeing that they're like the number 2 seed in the West. I
Right.
guess right now the only move I can possibly be seeing them make is obviously like going out and getting a player, like getting Rudy Gay or a player like Rudy Gay. They'd
Mm-hmm.
probably have to give up maybe a draft pick and some of their players off the bench, probably a player like Spates or Rivers or someone. But
Yeah.
right now, I can see them either going for Rudy Gay or a player that plays similar to him, or just continuing with what what they've been doing pretty much for continuing with the roster that they've had since the beginning of the year. Because if you really think about it, they haven't really been doing that bad. They're the second team in the Western Conference right now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's either
Yeah.
yeah.
I do. I feel that maybe making a trade for like a. Well, it does feel like they have a lot of backcourt players, but maybe a
Yeah.
Randy Foy or something like that. Someone who can sort of come in and just easily could be a starter on many teams, but comes off the bench here, I feel, because there's a lot of on paper and a lot of nice players like Brandon Bass and Alan Anderson and Paul Pierce. Those are all like really good, solid bench players, but none of them have played this season. So
Yeah.
it's tough. Like, are they going to be effective? Maybe we'll see the Clippers use them a little bit more once they feel a little bit more comfortable in the end of the season, and Blake Griffin and Chris Paul need their time to rest. We'll see more minutes from them. But yeah, it doesn't look like this there's a lot to work with on this roster. Not a lot of guys with high trade value, more just an odd look here. I have a hard time imagining really any big moves they could make.
Really, all of their players that have the highest trade value are pretty much anyone that's a starter. The only, like I said, the only expendable person that you could really get something valuable in return for is DeAndre Jordan. So
Right.
probably making a trade for him, because after that they have guys like Felton, Allen Anderson, and Brendan Bass, and Bryce Johnson, and Wesley Johnson, and
Yeah.
Diakhate. So it's like, yeah, I
What
can't
do
really.
you make of them as far as a threat in the West right now? Who obviously the Warriors and the Spurs are pretty good, to
Mhm.
say the least. But
Yeah.
some would say that the Clippers are better than the Spurs, and some would even say that the Clippers have a better chance than the Warriors, just based off of like experience and I guess maybe just some people really want to see the Warriors lose. But I mean, there's a lot. I mean, Memphis seems to be a little bit better. Mike Conley being injured doesn't help. Chandler Parsons being injured, but that's a team that could rise at the end of the year. And then maybe the Utah Jazz, the Portland Trailblazers. I'm not sure those are in the same league as the Clippers, but what do you think? Where do you put them as far as like a threat in the West?
For the Clippers, like how high do I think they're going to go in the Western Conference, right?
Well, yeah, sure. Let's go with that. What do you think this team can do?
Well, I think so far they've played the Warriors twice, and well, everyone pretty much what people have been thinking going into the regular season, where they're saying that Clippers and the Clippers and the Spurs were really the only two teams in the West that could sort of take down the Warriors, mainly because they have that interior presence. But
Right.
I guess they've played the Warriors twice, and I'm pretty sure that they lost the first time. They lost the second time, right?
Yeah, they lost pretty
Yeah.
badly both times.
So it's like you've kind of had two chances already to show that you could take down the Warriors using the Cleveland Cavaliers tactic in the NBA Finals, and it just hasn't worked out. I don't know if it's just off court issues that they've been dealing with, or if it's something with the coaching. But it's just what everyone expected out of them. It hasn't really happened. Like I said, they people thought that they would just use the Cleveland Cavaliers method and just sort of rely on a player like DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, their front court, because some could say they do have the best some could say that they do have the best front court in the NBA.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Oh, you could definitely argue that.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, so it's like people assumed that they would more they them and the Spurs would be the teams to take them down, but they've had two chances already and it hasn't really worked out. So
Right.
I guess really I can only see them being the third seed in the West, behind the Warriors and the Spurs. So
Yeah. The Spurs
yeah,
definitely seem like they um, kind of flipped the switch as to what
yeah,
we're kind of used
definitely.
to, because what we've become used to is an old Spurs team that doesn't care at all about playoff placement or what they do in the regular season. Therefore, they've shown no hesitation to rest players even on big nights. To where this year they haven't lost on the road. They're pretty much working every night to get a dominant win. But because they're now being led by a young player in Kawhi Leonard. So I feel like that's probably going to be the best record in the West. I know the Warriors currently stand at number one, but I would believe a little bit more in the Spurs continuity than the Warriors.
Mhm.
Just because it seems like the Warriors don't care about winning regular season games anymore after they proved what they could do last season, and that kind of almost was a lot of the reason as to why they maybe weren't so full of gas come playoff
Yeah.
time. So they definitely aren't going to be focused on that. So maybe the Clippers could sneak into that top two if the Warriors don't really value these everyday nights and so they could positioning in the playoffs is really everything. So that's going to come down to how hard the Clippers are going to play all season and if they can stay healthy. Because a team like the Spurs really just has to make sure Kawhi stays healthy, whereas the Clippers, they need to make sure Blake, DeAndre, and CP are all healthy, and they've had some problems with that in the past. Now, as far as actual results in the playoffs, do you think that this Clippers team can make the conference finals?
Well, for me, my Western Conference bracket is kind of looking like the Warriors is number one, and then the Clippers number two, and the Spurs not the Clippers number two, the Spurs number two, and the Clippers number three. So I can sort of see them being taken out in the second round by I think it would be the Spurs, right?
Right.
Based
Whoever,
on
if
how
they're a third seed, they would have to see the second seed.
yeah, in the second round, yeah. So
Yeah.
depending on if the second round beats the this not the second round, this it depends on whether the second seed beats the seventh seed. But
Yeah.
the Spurs will most likely beat whoever the seventh seed is, and then they'll probably end up beating the Spurs in the second round. So I feel like once that second round comes around, they won't be able to get past it. The Spurs are just way too. They have everything that they need to have that interior presence with Aldridge, and they have the Kawhi Leonard, who's can shut down almost any player in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I just don't see them getting past the Spurs if they do end up meeting in the second round of the playoffs. So
Right. It's
yeah,
certainly going to be a crazy matchup if we see the Warriors and the Clippers at some point in the playoffs, because you're going to have all these players all on the floor at the same time, regardless of team, that have all lost
yeah,
a 3-1 lead. So you're going to, because the
yeah,
Clippers a couple years ago against the Rockets, and then last year the Oklahoma City to the Warriors, and then the Warriors to the Cavs in the finals. So that's going to be kind of like who's ready to shake this label kind of matchup. If we're blessed enough to see that, I would love to see that. Here's where we defer. I don't think the Spurs could beat the Clippers in a 7-game series, just because I don't think the Spurs have enough, and honestly, enough weapons. But I mean, they always seem to prove me wrong. But
yeah, that's the thing. You
that's the
can't
thing.
really. It's kind of hard to bet against the Spurs based on sort of the history and the tradition they've sort of had with winning and advancing in the playoffs and being able to sort of somehow pull through no matter who they have
Always.
playing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of hard to bet against them. That's why now I'm like I've bet against them so many times, and I'm just like I can't bet against the Spurs. Just they've always just seemed to prove me wrong. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean that's certainly a justified logic. But
yeah,
as far as I just feel like they wouldn't hold up. It's just my take. And the Clippers, I believe, um, seriously could make the finals. I mean, if they have to play Golden State, they're not going to go to the next. They're not going to advance. But
uh-huh.
it's just I don't know. I feel it. I feel that there's too much. Like the Warriors are too perfect. That's how I feel, and it's just that they have so many reasons to be the best that it's just not going to work. And that's kind of what happened last season. But I mean, you could blame working too hard in the regular season or just
Yeah,
flat out choking or whatever. But I just feel like there's no way that 6-7 months from now we're still going to see this team the same way with the same roster, no injuries, nobody's struggling, nobody's getting fined or whatever. Looking at Draymond, there's a lot that has to go right for the Clippers to beat the Warriors, but I would certainly, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a huge Clippers fan, but I really would like to see them kind of finally shake this slump and just actually make something happen.
Yeah, and I can like understand why, because like it feels like we've been waiting since almost 2000 and what? 2012,
Right. It
2011.
was just the today, the anniversary of the Chris Paul trade to the Los Angeles Lakers being vetoed, and
Exactly.
therefore him going to the other Los Angeles team. I think it
Yeah,
was
and if
6 years
yeah, it
ago.
feels like it's been so long, and we've sort of everyone is has. But I bet you at that point, a lot of us assumed that by now they'd at least have one championship. Uh, um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like we've waited this long, and they still have yet to have even made the finals. It's kind
Yeah,
of
I
hard to
mean
believe. Like, but
it's insane. They haven't even
yeah,
made the conference finals.
what didn't they make it that one year with the Rockets, or was it?
No, they didn't. That was
Oh no, that was
actually
the
just the
Warriors and the
second round.
Rockets. Oh yeah, that's right. They didn't even get past the second round.
Yeah, Chris Paul in his entire career has never left the second
Yeah.
round.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Wow. Then I guess that's even
It's
worse.
actually funny. There's a meme out there where they showed that there's only 3 teams, I believe, that haven't made it past the second round since
Hmm.
since the year 2000 or
Hmm.
2001, and
Yeah.
those teams are all, um, you know, Chris Paul's teams, and so it's just funny that he's sort of a loser. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, no, he's a great player. But it just, I don't know. I don't know how much to read into those kind of things. Like, is a guy actually just kind of cursed, or is
Yeah.
he just
No.
doesn't know how to win,
No.
or
It
is
really
that
just
just
feels like this whole Clippers organization is cursed as like a whole.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's insane how they even when they have like everything is going right. They have the right pieces. Um, it's like they still lose.
Yeah, well, maybe
It's
they
really
need a
hard.
new look. I mean, I don't, I know they just got a new logo and jersey, but I hate it. It's so ugly.
Hey, bring him to Seattle and the curse will be lifted. That's all I gotta say.
That's what I thought was gonna happen 2 years ago
Bring him
with
to
Steve
Seattle.
Ballmer.
I'll gladly accept the Clippers.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but
Yeah.
he decided to keep him there. That's too
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like they just need to sort of rebrand and just they just have a lot of bad energy based on like sort of their previous
yeah.
history. It's just I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that's true, and I
Yeah.
feel we all thought that would kind of stop when Chris Paul came to town,
Mhm.
and then DeAndre progressing a little bit certainly made us more hopeful, but they just haven't done it. And
Yeah.
I think this year's the year, though, and I think if they're ever going to do something, it should be this year. And I am a firm believer that if this year they don't make it out of the second round, and I don't
Oh,
care if
definitely.
it's because of an injury
Yeah.
like last year, or I don't care if it's for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't care. Every year there's something, even if it's unbasketball related, like the Donald Sterling thing. I mean, even like that ruined an entire year
Yeah.
for
No,
them.
that's
And then injuries or just blaming it on poor playoff seeding. I mean, I'm sick and tired of it. People are done. And
definitely.
Mo Spates had a quote after the Warriors loss where he played his old former team, which he won a championship with, and obviously. We wanted to know what that guy would say after a huge loss to his former team, and what he said was, "We've just got to stop, blaming the refs and whining and complaining, and we need to focus more on the actual game, because it's the complaining um, has become overwhelming, and it starts with their head coach. I mean, Doc Rivers and Chris Paul, who is an extension of the coach, are the
Hmm.
biggest yappers on the team, and it feels like I said at the beginning of the show, Blake Griffin's is purely just frustration. Chris Paul and Doc, I feel, is more just kind of their personality. But they have to work on that, because that's making them a really unwatchable team for a lot of people, and it makes them kind of a bad guy, which I don't think they really should be.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I feel like honestly, if they can't make it past it, at least make the conference finals. If they
Yeah.
can't at least make the conference finals this year, I don't care. Just trade Blake, trade DeAndre, trade Paul, and just start over.
Yeah.
It's been so long. That's the only way they can sort of either send the team to a different city or just completely just start over. Honestly, because
Yeah.
they have a really good team. They have the perfect players, and it just hasn't been working out. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's
you look at the history, few teams have had as much losing and as much of leeway. I mean, in smaller markets, you probably would have seen the Clippers leave town a long time ago.
definitely,
They've had
yeah,
a long leash
yeah.
because of the fact that they're in probably the
Los
biggest
Angeles,
market. Yeah. Um,
yeah.
but I think that just about wraps up the show. Till next time. Thank you for listening, guys. Make sure that you tune in on Twitter. Make sure you follow us on there at 6 Year Stint. Make sure you follow Serigne at King Serigne, Serigne. And make sure that you follow his website and his blog. Can you give us a couple words on that?
Yeah. Pretty much. I've been well, as of lately, I haven't been writing on it mainly because it's been finals, and I kind of want to focus on getting this done so I can have a what to do.
Understandable.
Yeah, yeah. But I've been trying to write daily articles. I've done it for the past week and a half. Like I said, I might be taking a break this week because of finals. But pretty much, I just write about anything recent that's been going on in basketball. And yeah, just go check it out. It's www.hooptalkdaily.wordpress.com. So
Yeah, so make sure you guys check that out, and make sure you follow all of us on Twitter, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast, 6 Year Stint NBA podcast. You can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, or any other podcast apps. And until next time, guys, thanks for listening. My name's Sean Temesi. You're listening to 6 Year Stint NBA podcast.